changing the world of work for women everywhere. We are Watermark. We're the only nonprofit women's leadership organization that spans all industries. We connect, develop, and advocate for the advancement of women in the workplace. The Watermark community includes senior executives, entrepreneurs, and emerging executives that support you not only at the top of your field, but also on your way up.
Hello. And I'd like to invite the panelists to come join me. Please do, and I'll give them a few moments to share a bit more about themselves, but I want to talk a bit about the topic today, which this entire day is really about innovation. But the thing that I find so challenging about innovation is even when you're in the innovation business, you're still in business. And it's really hard to fit that in. And I find it a little ironic that here I was starting a company, we were on the bleeding edge, and we had to constantly ask ourselves what we're doing next. It doesn't end. And when I advise companies now, I advise companies who are in the growth stage, and they feel like, well, we made it past that, now what? And they think that they have to do exactly what they were doing, just bigger. I have to always remind them, actually, you're not done. You're never done. And once you get that straight, it becomes a lot easier to accept. So the three women here today all come from very different sectors, and they all really are innovation agents within their companies. So I want them to introduce themselves and share a little bit more about how you are involved in an innovative program or project, just so you get a sense of what their everyday life looks like. We'll get more into how you do it, but just a little bit of a taste, starting with Kimberly.
Good morning, everyone. I am a program manager over at Bay Area Rapid Transit. And prior to joining BART, I was a management consultant at a major teaching medical institution. So I took that private sector experience into BART, where I am responsible for all of our procurements, our budget for about 700 people. I am also responsible for the asset management program and training and development.
Great. Kimberly has a big project that we're going to talk a little bit about, and it kind of blows my mind when I think about it. But we'll talk about it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Layla Rivas. I head up global social media at Oracle. So this is actually my first time on campus here. It reminds me of my high school campus. I love it. I didn't think I would actually love that, going back to that feeling, but I do. Anyway, so what I currently do is oversee everything from training staff on the different social channels to best practices, looking at emerging channels, changes. There are so many changes with algorithms, as everybody probably knows here, that keeping up to date on everything, having the right talent is critical to staying ahead of the game. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. My background is in advertising and actually entertainment. I worked in entertainment for 10 years in Hollywood. And then when I sort of felt like I needed to do something different, a different challenge, more meaningful, I actually went back to grad school. I was one of the older graduate students and studied emerging technology and communication for social change. So looking at how communication and technology can actually not only change perception, but change culture, change individuals, change lives. So I try to take some of those learnings and bring them also to my role at Oracle.
Great. So hello everyone, and I'm happy to be here. I'm Catherine Shugart, and I am the Senior Director of Business Applications at a company called FireEye. I'm not sure how many people know FireEye, but we're a cybersecurity company based in Milpitas. We've got about 5,000 customers in 67 countries. And as you can imagine, cybersecurity is a very interesting area right now, especially, we hear about the Russians and everything going on. So it's a quite dynamic environment, so we'll talk about that a little bit. So my role at FireEye, I'm part of IT, and I'm responsible for running all the business applications that support our main lines of business. So, you know, I work every day with sales, with finance, marketing, HR, pretty much all the main business groups. So my team is mainly business analysts and developers. I have half my team in Milpitas, the other half in India. So that's one of the challenges that we often deal with, is just time zone difference and working in projects. But our main focus is keeping the business running. So quality and making sure that everything is working properly and perfectly is very important. And then the other piece is we continue to enhance and do major projects to continue to make our applications better and our business more efficient.
Thank you. So first question I want to direct to Kimberly. And I'm doing this because I think it's rather funny. That my question is, how do you innovate while keeping literally the trains running on time? That is actually Kimberly's job. You have a big project that you are in the process of. And can you tell us a little bit more about that project and how you are managing something so transformational for just the entire operation while you still need to provide ongoing service? I mean, it's very difficult to say, sorry, your BART train is going to be late today because we're scheduling innovation. No one really understands that. So how are you creating an experience that people can expect and that they always do expect while still integrating?
Well, I think one of the most important things is transparency, and it is to be honest with our customers about what we can expect and what we are doing. So one of the major things that we are undergoing right now is we're listening to our clients, and our clients are riders, and we were listening to the public, and one of the things that everybody said was, the trains are too noisy. It's noisy when I go through the tube, it's noisy when you pass by my house, what are you going to do? And we've tried a number of things with varying degrees of success, but not very successful. So as we were looking at our new car procurement, we are doubling the size of our fleet. We asked our new car builders, among other things, to make the trains more quiet. They came up with a very innovative change in our wheel profile. It only changes the profile about this much, but it makes the trains like 50 to 75% quieter. So one of our engineers said, well, if we can do that with the new cars, why not try that with our current fleet? And since it had never been done in the country before, we decided it was for us to do, because we want to be on the leading edge of all the innovation in the transit industry. So we began doing diagnostic tests on what it would look like to change all 5,000 wheels in our fleet while maintaining the service that our customers enjoy. And it has been a very interesting experiment, because one of the things that we found is that in doing so and listening to our customers, we found that changing the wheel profile actually makes the trains quieter, but it requires less maintenance on the rail tracks, and it lowers the cost of our wheel costs. So listening to our customers really did make a tremendous difference in terms of doing something that we thought was innovative and creative. We had to go really, really slow in the process because we wanted to make sure that it was safe to change the wheels in the middle of, running as much service as we do, but it has turned out to be a very fruitful experience. Over the next year or so, you'll see that the trains are much quieter and our customers are much happier.
You mentioned that it's a slow integration.
Yes.
How have you planned that rollout? I just wonder, especially given the day-to-day nature of what you're doing, what kind of planning did it take to figure out how you're going to roll this out across all of the cars?
Well, we had to get all of the stakeholders involved, obviously, and we involved a third party, a neutral party, to see if what we were trying to do would actually work. So after we got all the stakeholders together, everybody, kind of panicked, which is what we do at public agencies. We just want to stop because we don't want to do any more than what we have to do often. But because we needed to respond to our customers, we forged ahead. So we got the stakeholders involved and we asked the question, how do we do it? Not whether or not we can do it. The question is, how do we do it? We realized that we could start very small and start with a couple of cars, test it out, see how it works, and integrate it to do one car at a time. Well, we have 700 cars, which is why it's going to take, 12 to 18 months to do. But one car at a time, we'll change it, and it'll be safe because we won't change the the rail car wheel trajectory on the track. And as we move along, the tracks will automatically adjust to what we're doing. So it should not impact rail car service because we are changing the wheels at the same intervals that we would be changing them anyway. We're just going to change them to the new wheel profile, and that took a lot of coordination with our wheel builder. The wheels weigh about 1,000 pounds, and each wheel costs $2,500. And so they do a lot of R&D back in Pennsylvania where we buy our wheels. So the most difficult part was making the transition with our current tire builder, because we did not want to overinvest in the old tires as we moved and translated into the new wheel profile.
Layla,
Cool.
5 years ago, if you had asked me who were the top socially driven companies, I would not have mentioned yours. I would have thought of a few others. Now Oracle is a leader. So how are you adjusting to that? Clearly there was a business decision was made about where you wanted to play, but that didn't necessarily translate into the culture that was currently at Oracle. So I'm curious to know what that transition was like for you, getting other people on board with a very, very different way of being.
That's, sorry, I felt something in my throat. I think that's a really great question because, to be completely honest, we're still going through it. I mean, it's a big company and we have so much talent. I mean, and I'm not just saying this because I work here now, but it is one of probably the smartest group of people I've ever worked with in terms of across the board. I haven't met somebody who wasn't sharp. But there is a tendency when you work at a company for a long time, or particularly with Oracle being B2B, we don't have consumer-facing products. So whereas you have, other companies that are familiar to the consumer, people may not know what we do if they're not in technology. So that's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to showcase the fact that almost every business and runs on Oracle. It's a foundation of, BART.
Yes.
I could name a company and they probably have Oracle. So I think the challenge is, one, communicating that as a story, but also education. And I mentioned earlier staffing. With the changes that are going on, typically across many different companies that I've worked, almost all of them, including creative agencies, you have a lot of project management, but you don't necessarily have a lot of copywriters, editors, filmmakers. So these are the kinds of roles that we're having to adapt, retrain, hire, and that is really a huge part of innovation, how to tell these stories about something in the oil and gas industry, or in a particular field like healthcare. How do you tell something that might not be, oh, we're making this particular wearable? Maybe it's more of a data-driven story, and how are we leveraging that data to cure cancer? So I think, looking across, we're trying to do a lot of education, a lot of training, and really helping people look more from the outside in. A lot of times, we all have a tendency to say, no, this is important to my business unit. I need to have this Twitter channel because I need to get my message out and amplify it. everywhere I work, people say that. And I'm like, well, as a consumer of the content, if I'm searching online, am I going to look for an at Oracle CPQ channel? No, I'm probably just going to look for Oracle and whatever the name of the product is, or security, and use keywords. So helping people understand how the consumer searches for information and seeks out information is really critical to also training how we, facilitate that learning and have people understand that it's not just about how you want them to receive your message, but how they're actually seeking out that information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and what occurs to me about Oracle is that you have such a strong product suite now for other content creators, and you would need to cultivate that from within in order to fully understand what it is you're offering to the public. How did you it sounds like you, through a lot of hiring, skills development, training, I'd be curious to dig into that a little bit more and understand, how did you get people who are already there on board and really understanding what the business that you were all getting into?
Okay, that is another great question. It's it's trial and error. I think for my team, it's oftentimes, because we run a group called the Social Media Center of Excellence, so if anyone wants to open a new channel, for example, instead of getting frustrated when they don't understand what's required, if you want to open a channel and you're going to manage it, you have to field customer service, you have to have those creative resources. If you want to be on Instagram, it's not just taking photos of events all the time and random faces in a crowd that nobody knows. It's what's the learning, what's the takeaway I'm going to see, what's the beautiful shot of the inside of the auditorium that speaks to community and innovation. So I think it's not getting frustrated, and sort of once you start to explain to people and you don't get frustrated about why don't they get it, and I think then the doors open and you get advocates on your side. So we're starting to really kind of go, okay, that's where a bunch of trainings that we're currently developing, we started to see that we got a lot of resistance, people not really understanding the big picture or how the platforms work. Now we're involving them more. We're doing trainings so that they can understand what these requirements are and how to think creatively about the role that they're in if they're trying to do more social media at the company.
That's great. Catherine, along the lines of the trains running on time, you oversee security.
Yep.
This is an area where it's not set it and forget it. You have to constantly be aware of what's out there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's hard enough having to manage this on a day-to-day basis. How would you describe the culture around innovation there? And how do you stay on top of all of the new threats, the new things that you have to constantly be aware of, and developing the skill sets to manage to that?
Yeah. Well, obviously, as you said, the security space is extremely dynamic. And so the FireEye culture overall, we focus on innovation in many different ways, definitely with our products, but also within, for example, the IT organization, which sometimes we're not the most innovative because we do focus on keeping things running. But in our organization, we have a lot of goals that we set for people around innovation, as well as rewards. We give quarterly rewards for innovation. But one thing with FireEye, so we started in 2013, and at that time we were an appliance-based product. So we were a product that customers would run on their own site. And, as we know now, the world is moving to the cloud. So one of the things that FireEye has really focused on is moving from appliance into virtual machine and then a cloud-based product. What it meant for my team in running the business applications is this was a whole new business model for us. How do we change the way we sell cloud? How do we license the product? How do we recognize the revenue? How do we invoice? So all of that had to change, and it affected many of our business applications. So we do run Oracle as well, but we use a number of other applications around that. And so what we have moved to is a model, a more agile model, and I think many of you who might work in IT or in other industries, you're familiar with agile, but we really, really, truly took it on, and we have, for our new product introductions now, we have a core set team that's a collaborative team that we brought analysts, developers, and also business people into the one team. And as we move, in fact, we just, FireEye announced a new product in December. We went live a couple weeks ago with that new product, which is a pretty fast pace for us to change business applications. But the way that we did it is we worked in 2-week sprints or intervals. And in many cases, the requirements are not fully locked down at the beginning. So what we do is we iterate in small chunks. So every 2 weeks, we would deliver a new requirement or a new piece of functionality, and then we'd rethink and we'd look at any changes that had come from the business, and we'd adjust and we'd go through and do it again. So actually next week we go live. Our product is called Helix, and so we'll go live with our applications next week, and it was actually several weeks ahead of schedule, and also through the process of requirements changing all the time, but we could adjust because we were working in those small chunks. So that's one thing that we've done within my organization. We haven't been able to do it for all projects, but for projects where the whole thing isn't defined up front, you don't necessarily know. You have the vision of what the end result is going to be, but you don't know every bit of it. What my advice is and what our team does is we just continuously iterate and deliver what you can, what you know in the small chunks.
Well, and also in your business, which I'm sure there's many. I know even in media we would get the same thing of the vendors with the new solutions. And
Yeah.
as much as I hated taking every single one of those meetings, you kind of
Yeah.
feel like you have to, even though
Yeah.
1 in 100 might end up being a worthwhile partnership.
Yeah.
How much time do you allocate for
Yeah.
new opportunities, new partners?
Yeah. So we have 10 plus software vendors, even more actually, that my team and I work with regularly. And I view it's just part of my job. That's a big part of my job, is to understand where our vendors are going. And just like we're always innovating and changing, companies like Oracle are always developing new features and adding new things. So a big part of my role is understanding what they're doing, what's coming. So I spend 20% or even more. I would even go up to 40% of my time. And if I was actually thinking on this question and looking at the last month, where have I spent my time? I mean, last week I was at 2 conferences. This week, this will be my 2nd conference, plus an EBC visit with a vendor. So we're constantly going out and understanding what's happening in the market, as well as we have 2 new projects and vendors that we're now working with, as well as new projects coming. So some new vendors we want to bring on board. So that's a big part of what I do, because I then am part of the decision of where we're going to move forward, and then my team can, I'm setting the lead for them to know what they're going to be working on next. So it's definitely a big part of my time, and frankly, it's a big part of my job, yeah.
So it's become legend, Google's 20% rule. 20% of your time can be spent on innovation, whether or not that still is actually happening. Anyone from Google who can confirm or deny? Yes? Okay.
Yeah.
So that sounds amazing. I also don't know how you do it. I'm curious to know, how are you funding innovation? What happens when you realize that, wow, a 1/4-inch change to the wheel will make a big difference, and now I've got to make a case for funding this project? Curious to know from all of you, how do you fund innovation? And Layla, do you want to start with this one?
Sure.
Okay.
I think, what we look at are those partners. I think looking within, but also looking at who is doing innovative things in the industry. May not even be B2B in our case, it could be on the consumer side, but looking for partners that can also bring a fresh take and perspective. That's a way in which we can not have to spend an incredible amount of money, but get something fresh and new to help inspire us. I mean, to your point about going to conferences and trying to be on top of things in my industry, I would say we probably spend about 30 to 40% of our time there, because we have to update materials, we have to make sure any changes are actually, we're also, as a company, developing apps that integrate with LinkedIn's demand gen functionality. So it's multifaceted and sort of staying on top of those things. And so I'll allocate, whether it's 10K to work with a videographer in Oakland who is connected in the community and brings a fresh take to our employees' stories, we'll leverage that local talent. I think it's important, since we sit in the Valley, to look at what we have here as well and really have a foothold. I mean, we're building, a high school on campus. I'm seeing Colleen over there. Hi, Colleen. Who's instrumental in that project, DTech. Fostering that innovation at home is important. And so looking at that talent, looking at our channels here, I mean, we're right down the street from Facebook, so we go there at least once a month, chat with them, see what's happening. And that's where we learn things that may not get announced yet, like Mark's really talking about video first. Next thing we know, a month or two later, he's talking about video first, and they're changing the algorithm. So then we have to make sure we're able to, how are we going to turn around in 24 to 48 hours, motion files, animations, things like that. So that's sort of the take and approach we have.
Well, and it strikes me as a departure, given that I used to see Oracle in a very siloed environment, right? It's like, this is the competition, here we are. In some ways, you have now figured out ways to partner with others in the space just so you can keep the innovation loop going.
Yeah, and we may not always talk about it in terms of the, when we can, it's great, like with the LinkedIn integration, but we are definitely engaging with other partners and talking to them. We still have that competitive edge. America's Cup, by the way, May. Watch the races. But no, that's another aspect of marketing and innovation that's happening too. I've become really excited about it. I'm going to start taking up sailing because watching the, it was a data story initially, tracking the data points on these boats, or what they're called foiling catamarans, but taking that data, mapping it to wind data, working with BMW, working with Airbus, working with Parker Hydraulics to basically innovate an entirely new type of boat that can be powered by these men. There are no engines. They're all powered by the power of the sailors, and be able to leverage technology to build different kinds of vehicles. I mean, it's pretty fascinating, the levels to which you can take innovation and storytelling. So we're excited about it.
Very cool. Kimberly, how did you fund your project? How did you get, it's expensive, it's time consuming, and I imagine that there were people that may or may not have been in favor of doing this. As you said, as a public organization, you have people that are more averse to change,
Yes.
perhaps.
Yes.
How did you get it funded?
Well, we have a very unique department. In our department, we view innovation as an investment in really transforming our future. Because as I mentioned before, we have the best availability in the country and the best reliability in the country, meaning that we put out 90% of our fleet every day, and no other transportation agency in the country does that, but we do. We have the oldest cars in the country, yet we have the most reliable cars in the country. They don't break down. However, our customers are saying this is not enough. So what we've had to do is really go out into other sectors beyond transportation, go into the private sector, see what other people are doing in terms of maintenance, see what other people are doing in terms of reliability, and see what other people are doing in terms of responding to their customers. So we really look at innovation at very much the way that you would look at your own personal life, your own medical history. You look and see how your body feels, and you look at how it's performing. You get some medical tests, some diagnostics, and you make some improvements. And one of the things that we are doing in addition to that, in addition to the Wheel project, is we have several other projects that we're working on, and maybe I can talk about those a little later. But with the Wheel project, again, our customer said it's too noisy. So as we looked at changing our Wheel profile, we did not necessarily look at the cost first, and we did not look at we focused on what was best for our customers. So we continue to look, and even on a smaller scale, and even in a public agency, I think it's important to show some type of value in change, because people typically can be resistant to change. And so one of the things that we really did was, and it wasn't very expensive, was to work on the project on a much smaller scale. And as we began to see value in it, we talked more about the value. We talked to our customers about the value. We talked to our internal stakeholders about the value. And we really looked at some of the financial benefits to it. As I mentioned before, the new profile has much less maintenance on our track, and the wheels are much less expensive. So we were able to fund this new change actually in a situation where we are actually spending much less money than we would have normally. And in the public sector, and it's probably very much the same way in the private sector, budgets are flat. So we are actually asked to do more with the same amount of resources. So innovation helps us to be able to provide a larger level of service, and even come down here to San Jose and keep our expenses level.
There was something really interesting you said to me the other day when we spoke, and we were talking about competition, and you said yours was Uber, which I would not expect. I mean, perhaps it is, but I think it underscores that you have been going outside of, you going into the private sector to really look at what's being done elsewhere. What else, was that a compelling argument internally, saying, hey, there's other places, that there are other organizations, there are other startups that are actually doing, to some extent, what we're doing?
Yes, we look at, as a public agency, typically, we think, well, the public doesn't have a choice except to ride BART. But 75% of our customers have another choice. And the other thing that's really important to know is that BART has the highest fare box ratio in the country, meaning that our riders pay 75% of our operating expenses. So we have to listen to you. But first of all, you have another choice, and you're paying a lot of money to ride BART. So one of the things that we are looking at as we look at the demographics of our riders, we're looking at what they're doing differently. And we're finding that for BART riders, many of them for inner city travel are using Uber or Lyft or Flywheel or something else. So we are looking at options to provide customers another option, particularly if they want to ride out to San Francisco Airport or if they want to have another mode of travel. But it's really interesting to know that, this is fueling us and propelling us toward innovation, finding ways to be more creative in providing our service, and finding ways to keep our costs flat. Because again, we can't raise the prices just because we, can't figure out a way to keep the costs lower.
You have a ton of data on users. Clearly, you've been listening. I think that data is a bit of a double-edged sword. You can have a lot of it and not know what to do with it. So I'm curious to know how you, and for everyone on the panel, how you are using data, and how do you make sense of it, and how are you benchmarking against something when you've never really done it before?
Well, what's important to us in terms of what we want to do in the future, again, we want to keep our costs flat while we expand our service. So we do look at reliability. We look at what is going to make the cars run longer, more efficiently, more effectively, so that we don't have to keep bringing it back to be serviced. The same as with your car. If you had to take your car in every day to be serviced, then it really isn't a benefit to you. So we really want to make sure that the cars can last longer. And we use that reliability data to figure out how to make investments in the cars. We also look long-term and know that we need to make some bigger investments in the organization. It took us a while to find some funding, but we are doubling the fleet in the next 2 to 3 years. And one of the things that's important as we double the fleet, we'll be retiring some of the older cars. And obviously, some of the least reliable ones will be the first ones that we retire. So we use our reliability data to determine which ones should be retired first so that we can continue with the higher level of service. And the second is that we use the data to determine what investments we want to make in the cars. We don't want to overinvest in cars that we'll be parking in a couple of years. So, funding innovation is something that we've had to do in order to provide the level of service that we would like to provide.
We will be taking questions. So if anyone has one that they're thinking of, just raise your hand and I'll absolutely get to you. Catherine, about data.
Yep.
How are you managing all the data? How do you know what is relevant data?
Yep. Well, the first thing is, what are your key KPIs, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is most important for your organization to measure? And we do have a lot of metrics, but if we look at what our most important ones are for an IT organization for us, one is pace. How quickly can we deliver and turn around what we need to, and how do we continue to improve our pace? Another is quality, so we continue to always measure what we're delivering, and using our quality data, we'll get down to the root cause so we can fix and improve for the next time. And then the other is efficiency. So talking about how do you budget? We do have budgets at the beginning of the year, but also we do what we call self-fund, which is as we get more efficient, as we, for example, can consolidate some of our tools, things like that, we save money that then we can reinvest in doing new things. So, one of the things we do with my team is we do capture our time and where we spend our time each week. Not that we're measuring, is everyone working 40 hours, but what are we spending our time on, and how can we reduce the time spent on things that aren't moving the needle forward? So that's another thing that we really focus on. So those are sort of our key metrics and measures.
Are there any questions? Did I see a hand down? I have one, so I'll keep going. But if you have one, just raise your hand and we'll get, we already have right here. I'm ready to hand you my mic if you'd like. I'm happy to do it. Thanks.
So not every innovation is going to be successful, obviously, otherwise it's not really innovative.
Right.
What do you do to sort of increase the tolerance for failure in your organizations?
So I could say a few things. So, I mentioned when we go into production, it's got to work. So for major projects, or many of the projects that we do a lot of conference room pilot, where we'll walk through, before we even start the innovation, we'll do a walkthrough with the business, our business partners, to make sure it's what they really want. We do proof of concepts. So before we finally select a vendor or move forward with a big project, we do proof of concept. I mentioned the agile process. So we have a project going on right now. So every 2 weeks, we'll demo what we've done and validate it with the business. And I think that's a big part of success. Continue to validate. Am I doing the right thing? Is this what you really want? We have a CPQ project going live in July. We're going to start a pilot in a couple weeks. And so we'll be live in production, but with a small group of sales people to get feedback from them. So, you know, a big part of avoiding failure, but also course correcting and make sure that you're delivering something successful is getting that constant feedback, that constant validation. And, you know, we all know from IT in the past the story of this is what the business wanted and this is what IT delivered. So a big thing we've learned is keep iterating.
We do something similar. It's called the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we like to do it after an event or after a particular promotion, whether we're doing a paid program across multiple social channels. We'll look at performance and we'll say what worked well, what didn't work well, what was surprising. And we often find, I mean, it's not that surprising that most of the content we see performing well has a personal angle. As much as we try to say, oh, but how does this tie back to the cloud, or how does this tie back to this? We see, though, you know, on LinkedIn, and actually we're starting to notice things changing even there as well, that whereas a month or two ago our top 3 considerations to migrating to the cloud might have performed really well, it's actually something that relates to what I might have to deal with personally at work, like going to market faster, or, you know, getting a promotion at work, and we integrate that with some of our HR solutions that do predictive and analytics. So, you know, we look at whether it's performance of content or performance at an event. We might have been doing the same things on Twitter that we did 2 years ago. Well, people aren't using Twitter as much anymore. Actual number of tweets is down around 50%, or at least last it was reported through a leak to Business Week. So we're gonna have to look at how we measure then. It's always gonna look like we're not necessarily doing as well at this particular event, but actually if people are using Twitter less, it's not really apples to oranges. So that's kind of what we do for our good, the bad, and the ugly. And I did not make that up. That came from an ad agency I used to work, but I liked it because it was a little bit more like, we all know what that means. What did we do well? What did we not do well?
But I like that it's an impersonal approach.
Yeah.
It's not, did we screw it up? Right? It's,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
right, what worked, what didn't?
We're really good. I think the more you kind of look at stuff, and that is another thing I can say at work, is they're very good about talking about what didn't work, even if it's on me. Like, say it's my project, and I'm like, you know, I gotta say, I thought those animations were gonna be, you know, really good, but they didn't deliver, so do we go to another vendor? Or we didn't have enough time to do it right, so we need to do it this way next time. So being honest about it, the more you're honest about what worked and what didn't work, the more everybody feels safer, too.
Do we have more questions? Yes, right here.
Sorry for my loud heels.
Wooden floor at a women's conference. I like it because we're present. So given some of that you have been talking about the retrospective, which is really important, you know, AI, artificial intelligence, is really coming into the picture. How do you use that to do predictive analysis and maybe push yourself forward either by small steps or leaps?
Is that for me? Oh, okay.
Is anyone using AI?
A lot of AI technology is used for social measurement and prioritization of content. So what we do is more around, if we allocate budget to a particular promotion, the algorithm itself and the AI technology used by, say, Facebook, with whatever integration we might have with Eloqua or a number of our products, it will start to prioritize the best performing content, and we'll have to be agile enough to look at the results every week and say, this is performing better, let's halt the money we're spending on something that's not performing as well and put it towards something else. So that's how we're sort of using AI from a social perspective.
So FireEye's product has AI in it. My organization doesn't directly work with that. So I would say within IT, it's minimal AI, but definitely at our company, we have a big investment in it.
So I have a question about threats to innovation and overcoming those threats. What are the threats to innovation in your organization? I'm going to start with Kimberly.
Yes, our major threat in innovation is not being able to move forward. One of the things that we did was we recognized that in order for us to move forward, we needed to have a more in-depth technological understanding of our rail cars. We recognized that being a generalist wouldn't work anymore. So we actually leveraged our Oracle solution in terms of understanding the demographics of our employees and understanding what the training and development would be. Years ago, we took people off the street and we asked them to be maintenance technicians. Now most of our maintenance technicians have at least a certification. Some are some are degreed, and we use our laptops to perform diagnostics on our systems. So we used technology to help understand what our training needs are going to be. 30% of the people in our department are new. So we used that to help us understand what training and development we needed to do to move forward. And we also use it in terms of analytics to determine where our opportunities and future people investments are going to be. So we understand what kind of people are going to be best as far as where we need to move forward, meaning that not only do we want technically competent people, because that's important, but we really want people to be digitally fluent and also have a continuous improvement methodology around the way that they work. So utilizing technology really helped us to understand where our investments were, and rather than spreading the training and development investment around like peanut butter, we have targeted investments, and we found that we were able to be much more productive with actually a smaller workforce. So when people left the organization, when we replaced them with higher functioning and higher performing people, we actually needed fewer people in order to get the same amount of work done.
And I have to apologize. I know I asked everyone for their perspective, but we are out of time. Will everyone be here at least for a few minutes afterwards as we're moving into lunch? Thank you so much, and thank you to the panelists for the great discussion. Thank you.